The first Pikmin game hit store shelves in late 2001, just 1 month after the release of Nintendo's GameCube. Interestingly enough, for both a console's control limitations and Nintendo's general association to younger audiences, Pikmin is a demanding real-time strategy puzzle game. Created and produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, the mind behind Donkey Kong, The Legend of Zelda, and the Mario Brothers, Pikmin was one of Miyamoto's last original concepts as a designer at Nintendo before transitioning more exclusively to a producer and supervisor role. The game was co-directed by Yoshi creator Shigefumi Hino and Masamichi Abe, director of 1080 Degrees Snowboarding on the N64. The original concept of Pikmin was actually a project titled Adam and Eve, in which players could effectively play God over characters in a prehistoric world. The player would continue to amass more controllable units and fight off large animals such as mammoths for the safety of their village. Eventually, these humanoid characters became the colorful animal-plant hybrids known as Pikmin. The technology at play, rendering the possible 100 individual Pikmin at any given point, is actually the same technology that was displayed in Nintendo's Super Mario 128 tech demo in the year 2000. Other than having multitudes of characters on screen and controlling them all at once, the developers felt aimless in the game's design until they saw the Pikmin all attempting to carry something larger than themselves. Reaching over 100,000 units sold in its first week and over 1 million in its lifetime, Pikmin was a bit of a surprise hit for a completely new intellectual property, gathering a dedicated fanbase who have continued to support the series for multiple entries later. For those who may be unaware, the very first video on this channel was a rather rough review of the original Pikmin trilogy. Since it's been so long and the format of these videos has changed so heavily, it made sense to give each entry their own shot at a more thorough examination. On top of that, the fourth mainline Pikmin entry has officially been confirmed in a 2022 Nintendo Direct. So, in anticipation of this unique franchise's return, let's figure out what's so great about Pikmin. While flying through space on vacation, Captain Olimar's ship, the SS Dolphin, is stricken by an asteroid and sent plummeting to a nearby unfamiliar planet. With his ship's pieces scattered across the world's surface and only 30 days until his life support system shuts off, the player has to help Olimar reassemble his ship in time to escape and return home. Luckily, Olimar isn't entirely alone in this emergency, as he quickly discovers and befriends a strange carrot-like species, which he decides to call Pikmin. By commanding up to 100 of these tiny workers at a time, Olimar and the player will have to find the missing pieces of the SS Dolphin, solving environmental puzzles and surviving the dangers of the local wildlife day by day. As pieces are returned to the Dolphin, the ship will visually repair itself and the player will gain access to more distant locations. Aesthetically speaking, the ship will also have less trouble taking off each night as it comes closer to being fixed. The game has 3 possible endings depending on how many parts the player collected in the end, and whether or not their escape from this alien world is successful. Pikmin's 30-day timer really gives the player the same sense of dread as Olimar, as they know the fate awaiting them if they fail their mission, having to start all the way at day 1 unless they happen to copy their save data on a previous day. In typical Nintendo fashion, our protagonist doesn't speak. Instead, the player learns more about his personality through his journal entries between each day, or whenever a new discovery is made while exploring this alien world. For the most part, these accounts of Olimar's thoughts will often be used to make the game's mechanics more clear for players, though some of his entries tell us about his family and life back on planet Hakatet, building the in-game universe during an otherwise quite lonely ordeal. There's a lot of character in Olimar's journal entries, with his tone becoming more hopeful if the player is doing well, and more distressed as his 30 days near their end. Now let's talk about this game's namesake creatures, the Pikmin. Each color of Pikmin needs to be discovered in a separate environment, and they all offer unique abilities to be used by Olimar in order to counter this hostile world's various threats and puzzles. Red Pikmin are fire resistant and more powerful in combat. Yellow Pikmin can carry bomb rocks and reach slightly higher areas due to their lower weight and large wing-like ears. Blue Pikmin can breathe in shallow water. As individual Pikmin mature from leaves to buds to flowers on top of their heads, they'll become stronger and faster. This maturing process takes place either before the Pikmin are plucked from the ground, or after they consume nectars, which can be harvested from specific locations in each level. When assembling a full-sized army of 100 Pikmin, it's fun to see the vibrant colors of these living plants instead of the most often dark and earthy tones of units in other strategy games. For specific interactions with the world around them, the player can throw Pikmin one at a time to wherever they've placed their cursor. If the current situation requires large numbers of workers over accuracy, then the GameCube's C-Stick can be used to direct all of the Pikmin in Olimar's command. This is especially useful for carrying large objects, building bridges, or tearing down walls. Like most other real-time strategy games, the player will need to bring back resources to their main base in order to produce more units. Instead of food, gold, wood, or whatever else, the game's primary resource is actually the bodies of defeated enemies. Bringing these fallen foes back to the Pikmin's incubation chamber, known as an onion, will immediately generate more Pikmin to grow the player's possible army and replace any losses from combat. To really guilt the player into keeping these tiny soldiers alive, small ghostly spirits will float away when a Pikmin falls in battle, so players have a clear understanding of how many losses they're taking in any conflict. If you're nearby, the Pikmin are generally smart enough to return to your side after completing a task. Otherwise, they'll stay where they are until you summon them with your whistle. When dismissed, the Pikmin under Olimar's command will split into groups based on their color, making it much easier for players to select the specific type of Pikmin necessary for a puzzle without a conventional cursor. Along with rallying them to Olimar's side, whistling for your Pikmin will also help them recover faster from being stunned after being thrown from an enemy's back. At the end of each day, all Pikmin need to be accounted for either in their onion, under Olimar's command, or close enough to the launch site to find their own way back. Any Pikmin left behind after the sun sets will meet a deadly fate at the hands of the local nocturnal predators. Sure, the Pikmin are not always smart enough to keep themselves out of mischief, and Nintendo even went to the trouble of programming in a tripping mechanic which causes some of the Pikmin to straggle behind, but all of that honestly makes it feel much more earnest. The only reason this makes the player turn around to fetch them is because the Pikmin matter to you greatly in one way or another. Whether you see them as tiny companions, or pets, or replaceable soldiers, they still have value to both the player and Olimar in an otherwise kill or be killed environment, no matter how nicely it's presented. Back to the Pikmin's artificial intelligence, however, it's only fair that a few of these hundreds upon hundreds of wild creatures will get stuck, or lost, or eaten, or who knows what else. And sometimes it'll be the player's fault, sometimes the Pikmin's, and sometimes pure random coincidence. And it feels arguably more natural than even the later, easier to control entries in Pikmin. Before choosing a location to spend each day, the player can see how many ship parts are in each area, how many have been collected total, and how large each Pikmin colony has grown. The game's first major stage would be the Forest of Hope, which is a wide open, warm, and charming meadow where the player can experiment with the majority of the game's mechanics, including confrontations with wild creatures and navigating environmental hazards such as water. After the bright, flat environment experienced in the Forest of Hope, our second major location, the Forest Navel, features wide varieties of ledges, utilizing a cave-like environment with stalagmites and other divots carved by erosion for a much more vertically complex stage. The third major environment, the Distant Spring, has a much heavier focus on water, as the title may suggest, with several beach-like microcosms to show off the fluid graphics on the GameCube and put the blue Pikmin's capabilities to good use. Each stage has plenty of unique puzzles and monsters to face, and a few specific boss-like creatures that have to be approached and defeated in specific ways, with each powerful beast also keeping one of the ship's pieces within its clutches. Some of the player's actions in the world around them will be maintained between days, with certain walls remaining destroyed, enemies defeated, and bridges built. However, every few days these changes will be restored, so the player has to work quickly before the world starts returning to its natural state. Every in-game day lasts about 13 minutes of real time, and can also be ended early should the player ever feel that they've completed all of their tasks for the day. Alongside the progressive lighting, the overworld music also gradually changes throughout the day, sounding more like a lullaby as nighttime approaches. Though the end of every day encroaches very stressfully upon the player, even nighttime itself isn't seen as something outright sinister. Instead, as Olimar returns to his ship each night, triumphant music is heard to celebrate the progress made that day. Pikmin's soundtrack was composed by Hajime Wakai, who had previously arranged music for Star Fox 64 and F-Zero X. The music heard during this adventure is a whimsical mix of science fiction excitement and the mystery of an unexplored world. Without any dialogue to hog the player's attention, Much more focus is given to the soundtrack, sound effects, and the chants and squeaks of the Pikmin themselves. The individual Pikmin creatures have their own audio cues when they're called upon, ordered to attack, or virtually anything else, just like the villagers and other grunt units that can be found in the majority of real-time strategy games, like the Age of Empires and Warcraft franchises. Since Olimar is so small, measuring in at roughly 1 inch in height, individual plants, rocks, and any miscellaneous decorations in the world around him seem so large and detailed, even if it's just a single dandelion or a few blades of grass. The texture detail is phenomenal in this game, and far more complex than anything that would have been capable on the previous generation's hardware. Considering the player is often just staring at dirt and grass underfoot, Pikmin somehow still manages to be one of the most visually pleasant and impressive games of this generation. While the circumstances are dire, Pikmin isn't too outright difficult of a game, as having even one decently productive day can give you plenty of breathing room in the search for missing pieces of the SS Dolphin. Once the player gets a handle on basic combat strategies and the knowledge of how to utilize each type of Pikmin, several pieces of the ship will present themselves as a reward for the player's increased skill at commanding a small army. Even outside of their usefulness, the player has plenty of motivation to keep these little soldiers alive because the Pikmin are cute, friendly, and a great counter to this game's lonely atmosphere of being stranded on a dangerous world. The entire concept of Pikmin, both in gameplay and design, is incredibly unique, and sticks out in the gaming world much like Katamari Damacy as a challenging, fun, and charming experience that sounds incredibly bizarre on paper. One of the game's only major shortcomings is the lack of replayability, with no multiplayer mode and a less than thrilling challenge mode. So the player's only real form of any extra entertainment is trying to repair the ship in a shorter number of days, or maybe reach the good ending if they hadn't on their first run. Otherwise, the stressful life or death scenario that Olimar finds himself in still provides an interesting, finite experience that's worthy of everyone's attention and the cult following that has blossomed around the entire Pikmin franchise. That is what's so great about Pikmin. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming, as we took a closer look at the microscopic world of Pikmin. Want to see some bonus content? Maybe support the creation of these videos? If so, check out the What's So Great Discord, Twitch, or Patreon. Links for all of those are in the description. If you want to hear what's great about another game, check out the link to our last episode, Quake, on screen or in the description. And please take the time to subscribe to be involved in the discussions here. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.